Okay, so our next page for day 3 is talking about protection from harm, and it starts off with the abuse prevention terms to know. We're talking about protection from harm. We all have an obligation to keep our service recipients free from harm. If we see anything that we think is abusive or neglectful, we have the obligation to report that. If we do not report it and we know about something, we're in as much trouble as the person doing the harm. So let's talk about abuse in terms to know, abuse prevention in terms to know. Abuse is the knowing infliction of injury, unreasonable confinement, intimidation, or punishment with resulting physical harm, pain, or mental anguish. Neglect is failure to provide goods or services necessary to avoid physical harm, mental anguish, or mental illness which results in injury or probable risk of serious harm. Exploitation is the deliberate misplacement, misappropriation, or wrongful, temporary, or permanent use of belongings or money with or without consent. Staff misconduct is actions or inactions which do not conform to acceptable standards of conduct related to provision of services and or safeguarding of service recipients' health, welfare, and or individual rights. So reporting things to the state, we're going to talk about in your handout, there's this grid that shows the type of incident. Notify as soon as possible, no later than 4 hours. Notify as soon as possible and no later than 24 hours. And then by the next business days. These are the steps that you have to follow when you're reporting stuff. So death is a reportable incident. And notify as soon as possible, no later than 4 hours. The regional office, AOD, for all deaths. Also the investigation hotlines if the death is suspicious, such as abuse, neglect is involved, or if it's unexpected or unexplained. Notify as soon as possible, no later than 24 hours, the legal representative. And by the next business day, the REF to the DID central office, notice of death form and REF to regional director, and the REF to the ISC agency or support coordinator. Also, alleged or suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation, we're going to call the hotline, and adult or children's protective services. And if it's criminal activity, we have to call the law enforcement. We're also going to notify the representative, and by the next business day, get the ref to the DID central office and to the ISC agency and the support coordinator. Serious injury of known or unknown cause. If unknown, the DID investigation hotline, also the protective services. Suspicious injury, such as caused by abuse or neglect, we're going to call the hotline and protective services. Reportable medical incident, regional AOD if unplanned or hospitalization. Med variances or omissions, such as administration by someone untrained or uncertified or unlicensed. We're going to call the DID hotline and the representative and get the form in by the next day. Reportable behavioral incident or missing person. Sexual aggression or criminal conduct. We're going to call the regional AOD for any hospitalization resulting from a behavior or psychiatric incident, or any behavioral incident with law enforcement or mobile crisis involvement at the scene, and all incarcerations. Reportable staff misconduct. Request for emergency services. Approval outside of regular DID business hours. So all of those are reportable. On the back, what is a reportable event? Behavioral psychiatric incidents or crisis, such as physical aggression, self-injurious behavior resulted in the following: any serious injury to another by the person supported, property damage of $100 or more, Any use of crisis services such as 911 or EMT, emergency room, mobile crisis, fire department, or law enforcement on scene. Use of manual restraint or mechanical restraint to include the application of protective equipment. PRN, use of psychotropic medication. Any physical act of sexual aggression, whether as a victim or perpetrator. Use of an urgent care center. Any incident of eating inedible objects, substances that required medical assessment, treatment by physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant. Any allergic reaction that results in medical assessment or treatment. Incidents requiring CPR, AED, or abdominal thrust procedures or other life-saving procedures. Any incident requiring assessment or treatment in a hospital, ER, or by emergency medical personnel. Injuries requiring the medical assessment, treatment by a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant, to include x-rays to rule out a fracture. Medication errors, treatment errors that require medical assessment or treatment by a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant, or medications administered by an uncertified staff. Medication variance is categorized as E through I. Death of a person supported, alleged or suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Serious injury of unknown cause, suspicious injuries, missing person over 15 minutes, missing person less than 15 minutes if they're at risk of harm. All hospitalizations, medical or psychiatric, any criminal incarcerations or criminal conduct. Any other adverse event which presents serious risk of harm to an individual. Incidents of reportable staff misconduct, that is, actions or inactions of staff which are unacceptable standards of conduct but do not result in harm or significant risk of harm. And if you needed to call the AOD, there's numbers here that you can call if you're the one that needs to call. It's listed in the corner of that page. The next few pages are the procedures. If you're the one that has to report something, if you would read these next policy and procedures pages, and that REF, the REF that you will fill out is found on our Orange Grove network. But if you had to fill out one on paper, this is what it would look like, except this would be a yellow form. I just used white paper for, saving money purposes for printing as to show, but it would be a yellow form. And on our Orange Grove network, it's listed under incident form, yellow form, something like that. You'll be shown how to find that. But if you had one on paper, this is what it would look like. It's the REF, the DIDD reportable event form. You would fill it out to the best of your ability, and it goes to our compliance department, and they will look over it to make sure it's correct. They may call you to say, hey, I don't understand what you said. They may get some clarification because they want it as accurate as possible when they send it in to the DID office by the next business day. Now, if you're the one that they tell you to go call the hotline by the phone somewhere, in the homes or throughout the center, you will see these listed. There's one in our office on the wall, and by your phone somewhere in the home or your department, the hotline number is there in the corner, and there's a list of investigators that come to investigate any allegations. Sometimes if you're falsely accused or any allegation has to be looked into. If somebody says so-and-so hit me, maybe that name doesn't even work there, or maybe they got the name wrong. Anytime somebody says they've been hit or abused, we have to look into it, and there's this process that they go through to investigate. And anytime that we think anything is abuse or neglect or exploitation, we have to report that. We are under obligations for protection from harm for the people that we support. So we always want to follow through with that exactly as outlined. If you have any questions, you can ask your manager or you can call our compliance department directly and they can give you help with that. So always report it, it's our obligation.